Warhammer 40,000, or as we like to call it in the community, Warhammer 40k, is a huge franchise that spans hundreds of books, is the most successful tabletop war game, has spawned thousands of memes on the internet, and has more than its fair share of video games. Heck, if Henry Cavill plays his cards right, the franchise will even have its own series on Amazon. As a newcomer to 40k, it might feel daunting to try to get into the franchise because it's becoming so massive, but my goal with this video is to give you the perfect starting point that is not only going to introduce you to the setting that we all love and enjoy, but also help you decide what to do after you've gotten a taste. And if you're already a 40k fan, then go ahead and share this video with your friends so that you can get them to love watching big, sweaty men in power armor duking it out as much as you do. As a newcomer to any hobby, the last thing you want to do is spend a lot of time and money on a hobby that you find interesting, only to later end up regretting your investment because you aren't having fun. I would never recommend that any newcomer start with the 40k books or the tabletop game, because the former takes up a lot of time and the latter takes up a lot of time and money. If you want to get the premier 40k experience in the shortest amount of time and in the most cost-efficient way, play Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2 came out in September of 2024 and was immediately a hit because of its callback to the early 2000s era of game design. But it also features a classic Warhammer 40k narrative with all of the elements that make up what most 40k stories are about, which is the struggle of the Imperium of mankind against the alien hordes of the galaxy, demonic entities from an ephemeral realm, and itself. In Space Marine 2, you play as a Space Marine, as the title suggests, and you're introduced to the Tyranids, one of the primary alien or Xenos antagonists in the present setting, and you also go toe-to-toe with the forces of chaos, the arch-enemy of humanity. Space Marine 2 isn't deep. If you've played Call of Duty, then you're going to recognize a lot of the storytelling elements. The game starts you out pinning you and your bros against a massive, invasive threat, the threat in this case being the Tyranids. Then it throws a pseudo-twist, not so twist at you by introducing the Chaos Space Marines, who are the real bad guys all along. But a story doesn't have to be deep for it to be good. For a setting with 10 authors contributing to the lore and overall narrative, the developers of Space Marine 2 did a great job with their attention to detail. In fact, the world of Space Marine 2 does a great job overall of immersing you in 40k. From the dialogue shared between the characters and the environmental storytelling to the responsiveness and deadly effectiveness of the Space Marine arsenal, everything has been crafted with a level of care that is quite impressive. Everything looks great, sounds great, and feels great, and all of this is delivered to you in about 10 to 12 hours of story, and this is a sufficient amount of time and content to help you determine if your interest in 40k has paid off or if it was misplaced. And if you're not a gamer, that's okay. You can just play the campaign at the lowest difficulty, and I promise that you'll make it through in one piece. At this point, if the setting isn't doing it for you, then at least you gave it a good try, spent a few bucks, and only wasted a couple of hours. But for everyone else, this is where things get interesting. Once you've completed the campaign, I highly recommend trying the other game modes. When Space Marine 2 released, I was very critical of Operations and Eternal War, but they've aged like fine wine as the developers have released more content and as they've made crucial changes to the combat system. If you're not a gamer, but you've enjoyed the story or lore that the campaign introduced, the Operations game mode is a good way to take it a step further. Not only do you get to experience more of the setting, but the developers have also recently added the Data Vault into the game. The Data Vault works hand in hand with Space Marine 2's achievement system, Ordeals, to present more lore to the player. As you complete more Ordeals, you unlock more lore in the Research Center, allowing you to dive into more of the background of the setting. If you find yourself reading through these entries and you like what you see, then you'll probably like a number of the 40k novels, and I recommend that you start with the Eisenhorn trilogy by Dan Abnett. Eisenhorn is probably the most well-written and well-liked 40k series out there outside of the Horus Heresy, which I don't recommend for readers who are just getting into 40k. I haven't read every single 40k novel yet, so if you think you have a better recommendation, let us know what that is in the comments. Along with unlocking more lore, completing ordeals, or just playing Operations and Eternal War also allows you to earn more cosmetic items for your Space Marines. If you're the kind of person who wants to make their Space Marines look as cool as possible, then at this point it might be worth investing in a tabletop starter set. You'll probably find a lot of satisfaction in collecting, putting together, and painting 40k miniatures, even if you never play the tabletop version of the game. But if you do ever get the chance to play, you've got your minis ready to go. Finally, if you invest a good chunk of time into Operations or Eternal War and you just want to experience 40k in other video games, then my two recommendations would be Darktide and Rogue Trader. Darktide is a first-person horde shooter similar to Space Marine 2's Operations, but features much more in-depth customization and more complex mechanics. That's not to say that there isn't a high skill ceiling in Space Marine 2, because there definitely is. If you don't believe me, then go watch First War Guardsman or Zambit Solo Operations in absolute difficulty. What Darktide offers is more options to lean into your playstyle with more weapons and build variety, and it just features more content than Space Marine 2 does currently. Meanwhile, Rogue Trader is a CRPG, so it plays drastically differently compared to both Space Marine 2 and Darktide, but it has the best story of any Warhammer 40k game, and in my controversial opinion, it tells the best 40k story in general. Rogue Trader is basically 4.5 books put into one game. The game features a ton of character customization and build variety, but for a lot of people it's really overwhelming, so you have to be willing to read through abilities or talents and learn its turn-based combat system, or just watch a build guide on YouTube. Regardless, whether you decide to get into the setting for the story and lore, miniatures and tabletop war game, or it's video games, Space Marine 2 is a really good place to start for any newcomer. And it's a really good time to get into 40k because we're starting to see higher quality video game releases, the miniatures become cooler year after year, and things are really heating up in the overall story. I hope that Henry Cavill is able to nail it with his Amazon show, because it would be awesome to see Warhammer be as mainstream as Dungeons & Dragons or Star Wars. Anyways guys, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Warhammer content, and as always, this has been Jeficus, and I'll see you in-game.